I'm Michael Brown, President of the School for Advanced Research, and it's my pleasure to host this event, Voices of the Clay. Before I introduce the speakers, I'd like to thank SAR members, as well as our board, Founder Society, and President Circle, whose support makes this and other online events possible. You may notice that I'm at SAR. We're actually doing this event from the SAR campus for the first time in many months, and it's a great pleasure. Some future events that might be of interest to our viewers and members. Our first Scholar Colloquium launches tomorrow. This begins this year's season. Weatherhead Fellow Scott Ortman, the University of Colorado, will be presenting a talk entitled Coming Together, Pueblo History in the Pojoaque Area. You can still register for this event on our website. We'll host a new scholar presentation every 2 weeks this fall. So watch the website and to get the dates and times of all these events. We recently listed some new online salons and a series of courses that start in October. The courses are a terrific way to engage with leading scholars on a range of topics. This year's topics include the history of American law, the archaeology of the 1921 Tulsa race riot and massacre, and the story of our nation's founding as seen through the eyes of Dr. Benjamin Rush. All of the salon and course information is available on our website, of course. If you're not yet a member, we encourage you to join today so that you can stay up to date on all the events that we'll be offering in the fall and beyond. Bruce Bernstein, PhD, is the Director of Innovation and Senior Curator at the Coe Center, where he develops public programming, working directly with Indigenous artists and the permanent collection of traditional arts. He's previously held senior positions at the National Museum of the American Indian in Washington and the Museum of Indian Arts and Cultures in Santa Fe. He's also served as Executive Director of the Southwestern Association for Indian Arts. He's dedicated his 3 decades of professional work in museums to collaboration and the modeling of new partnerships with Indigenous peoples. Russell Sanchez, San Ildefonso, Pueblo, is an award-winning artist who's been described as a master innovator in Pueblo pottery. Known for his hand-coiled, etched, and inlaid creations, Sanchez crafts each piece using traditional Native American pottery methods. Russell was recipient of the New Mexico Governor's Award for Excellence in Art in 2017. In 2019, he earned the Best of Pottery distinction at the Santa Fe Indian Market. He's one of the co-curators of the MIAC exhibit, Voices of the Clay. Erik Fender, who'll be joining us from San Ildefonso, where he lives, is an established artist whose works of pottery are influenced by his mother, Martha Appleleaf, and his grandmother, legendary potter Carmelita Dunlap. Erik's work ranges from traditional to contemporary. He's become recognizable for a style of green on black and green on red pieces. He's also received first place awards at the Santa Fe Indian Market, among many other awards. He's also, along with Russell Sanchez, is one of the co-curators of the MIAC exhibit, Voices of the Clay. Bruce and Russell, I'm doing a handoff to you.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I'm Bruce Bernstein, and it's my pleasure to be here at the school, and thank you to the school, to Michael and Meredith and everybody here at the school for hosting us today. We have a rather brief program to talk about centuries of pottery at San Ildefonso. It's been my pleasure to work with Erik Fender and Russell Sanchez over the past decade or so, but probably no longer than that. But about 2014, we decided that we'd begin to work on some writing projects together, and their knowledge and their insights have been wonderful in every stage of the way. We published a little bit, and then this exhibition that we opened last summer, Voices of the Clay, was again a further revelation. You know, the San Ildefonso collections were the first collections of the museums in New Mexico, but a lot of those collections hadn't been seen before. So it was a great pleasure to bring people into the collections from the community and have them hold pottery and see things that they hadn't been able to see up until that point. We are putting the exhibition online. We're working on that right now, and all the film programs will also be online that go with the exhibition. So we're looking forward to that a great deal. There's also a book project that goes with it, and since I'm doing the principal part of the writing. Of course, it's delayed as I'm a slow writer. So I promise that the book will be done pretty soon. So today, I'm here with Russell at the SAR. Erik's at his home at San Ildefonso. One of the things about San Ildefonso pottery, if we think about Pueblo pottery and we think about what we know about Pueblo pottery, pretty much everybody knows one potter, one name. And that potter is very important, and she was an incredible individual, incredible potter, but she stands within a long continuing tradition of pottery at San Ildefonso. So one of the principal things we try to do with the programs and our work together with the exhibition is show how San Ildefonso is not of individual families, but of a community of potters. And potters work together. And part of the complication of looking at pots and deciding who made what before the 20th century, before the 1920s, it wasn't important who made the pots, but it was important that the community of San Ildefonso produced those pots together. We do have some historic pots today here, both on Russell's table here at SAR, and then Erik's table at his home in San Ildefonso. They have some materials they're going to share with you. I'd like to just ask Russell to come up and start a little bit and warm us up with some of the materials, and just tell us a little about them, and then we'll cut over to Erik. And just please bear with us with the technology. We're going to do about 45 minutes of talk. Hopefully I've only done a few minutes of that. And then at the end, we'll have room for questions. So send your questions in. There's some link on the site to send the questions in. So please send your questions in. So about the last 15 minutes or so, and of course, people generally know how to find me or Erik or Russell. Please ask us questions as well. So Russell, please.
Hi, everyone. I'm just going to show you a little bit of the materials that are used, the techniques that are used. Here on the table, I've got the clay, which normally would be made into a patty, put in here, coiled up. Since we got to go fast, I'm going fast. So I want to show you some of the clay slips that are used. These are the red slips that are used for polishing. You've got the natural clay here, the white clay for the polychrome, and some of the black in here for the paint. After the coil process, then the pot would be resting in the puki still, taken out, and then worked on. After it's slipped, then it would be burnished with stone to get the high luster and the shine. After that, it would look something like this. This is in its natural color, but fired. Tans with reds. And then here, you've got a polychrome piece, which is inspired by these works here and this painting here, which was my grandfather's. And then again, a black bear, which is the same exact material here. A lidded piece here with some swirls and eagle feather design. And a lot of these pots that are produced here have a more contemporary, a more new look, but it's the same exact material that you have back here. Something like this bird here, which is figurative, moves into something like the bear and the mountain lion lid. It's just taking inspiration from these pots to create something new and a little older. Here you have a piece that we think is Ignacia. That's what the label said when I got it. It had the original labels on it, which would have been my great-grandmother. So we've got 3 generations here, my grandfather, Ignacia, and then me. And here you've got a piece that we think could be Ignacia or Marinita Roybal. We're not too sure. Again, back then, a lot of potters worked together, and it was kind of community and kind of like a quilting bee where they all would help each other work on pots. Since signatures weren't important, that's just how they did it. So I think we'll go to Erik for a little bit, and we'll come back here, and Bruce can talk about a lot of these older potters here.
You there? So while we're waiting for Erik, oh, there he is. Erik, you're on. Ready?
Hello, good afternoon. So like Russell was saying, you know, the materials that we use are the same exact materials that our grandmas and grandpas would have used 100 years ago, 200 years ago in creating pottery. You know, the same things that Russell was showing you, you know, the clays, the slips, the black paints that we use are all natural materials that have been used for years and years and years. In the creation of pottery, you know, it's all traditional techniques, but each of us artists have our own individual take on how we create our pieces, our design work. You know, some of these pieces that I've been working on in the past several years are more of a kind of not recreating, but inspired by the work that we've been doing with Russell and Bruce, and you know, taking a lot of inspiration from the older pieces that are in the collections in different areas. So you know, like Russell was saying, the pieces would be built, coiled, and then you know, right here I have a piece that I just recently made, and it's kind of a hybrid of a melon piece and another piece that I've done ready to be slipped is this basket, and these are all older shapes. Another piece here is a water jug. So you know, taking inspiration, but also making it my own. You know, I have a piece here that I'm working on that's going to be a black on red piece. And again, taking inspiration of the design work from the older style of pottery. Here is a large black on red. It's kind of a hybrid, you know, more modern design with the feather design, and then including some of the older style design work. Here's a polychrome piece, again, kind of a hybrid, making it my own, but using the same exact materials that were used by our grandmas and grandpas. The exhibit has really, and the work that we've been doing has really, like I said, inspired me, and I've gone back to some of the older designs. And this piece is typical of something that would have been done, you know, the late 19th century, early 20th century. You know, we're so used to seeing black on black or San Ildefonso pottery being known only for black on black pottery, but these are the older styles, and these are the more traditional styles. And like I said, the painting on this piece really goes back several, you know, decades. But again, using all the same traditional materials, using the same outdoor firing that would have been done way back, you know, and just, you know, making it our own and creating artwork that, you know, hopefully will inspire future generations. So it's a continuing legacy for the Pueblo, and it's a living art. It's always evolving. You know, I've done work mostly black on black style because that's what I grew up seeing. But some of these, like the polychrome and the black on red has taken me several years to figure out the sources, the slips, or even the red slip that we use for the black and red is a combination of polychrome slip and the red slip. So it's, getting that mixture just right is taking me a while to figure out. But I guess at this time I'll turn it back over to Bruce.
Well, you can see why it's such a pleasure and privilege to work with these two men, and just how knowledgeable they are. You can just tell the way they handle the pots and twirl them around in their hands. I think it's just lovely, and I think it's been truly a great journey. Everything I thought I was quite the pottery expert a decade or more ago, and everything I've learned is wrong. And it's really helped me rethink everything that we think we know. And one of the things about what we think we know is that the history of San Ildefonso pottery has been written by outsiders and from the outside perspective. And we in the Anglo culture really emphasize the individuals, where in the community, it emphasizes the communities and people's belonging inside that community. So when both Erik and Russell talk about working together, they mean that people sat down and really worked together, that they fired together, they built pots together, they shared ideas. And one of the key things to remember is, as Russell and Erik both remind me all the time, it's yours to use, but make it your own. In other words, don't just copy things, but make it your own. If we look back at pottery, I'm going to look at the table of historic pots behind us here to just get some ideas of that. So if we looked at the pottery and we understood pottery as being a series of ideas that evolved through time, we can see a pot like this. And a pot like this is wonderfully balanced. It's perfectly balanced. It's meant to be carried on the head. And these like rails on the side, but it's also beautifully, beautifully painted. Now, I always think that a pot works better with green foliage on it, birds, mountains, the sort of prayers that bring rain and fertility to the world. And I suggested that in our filming to one of the people in the community. And she said, Dr. Bernstein, I don't think that works at all. I'm not sure I'm willing to give that up yet, but I think that it makes the pot beautiful and more functional to have these waves on it, for example, and things like that is really, really important. So this pot, this is a pot, we know these makers' names. This is Florentino and Martina Montoya. And we know these potters' names because there's been some really good work done on them. And we have a lot of their work around. There's some names in museum collections. Now, they did a couple things, and they are the second generation out of the 1870s of this Renaissance of pottery. So the Renaissance in the 1870s is a woman, Yellow Deer, and another woman that Russell mentioned, Mary Anita Roybal. And these two women started this idea, and they passed it on to Martina and Florentino, who are different families. And they had this idea of red and black together. You can see that. And very inventive too, more designs on the surface, using more of the pottery to have designs. So when you come into the second generation, Russell was saying with this potter here, which is Russell's great-grandmother, Russell Sanchez, when you come up to a pot like this, you begin to see your creativity. There's nothing about it that is not San Ildefonso. And that's the amazing thing, that just is so clearly her hand, but at the same time, while we can suggest that it's made by her, it's also clearly San Ildefonso. There's nothing doubtful about that. One more pot, let me point this out. And so one of the things that happens in studying Pueblo pottery is people read a book or they hear an idea that all this pottery with this figurative work is always made by coaching. Life should be so simple. The villages are not sealed from one another. Ideas travel, and many people did different things. This painting on this, which is, I should hold this stiller, this painting on this piece too, are clearly some type of non-native figures, maybe circus performers, something along those lines to suggest that. But this also shows us that men are painting. And men didn't start painting in the 20th century. The men have been painting pottery at San Ildefonso for centuries before the 20th century. Russell, you wanted to bring something up?
I just wanted to talk about this piece, which is based on an old style San Ildefonso pot, and how this piece is inspired from a piece like this with a checkerboard design. So here you've got checkerboard design inspired by that. And then also the different rain symbols and cloud symbols here that represent that. So just showing the tie-in, what's old becomes new. And then a piece like this, which I did in my style of a polychrome revival, where I took the black slip and actually burnished it, and I got inspired by a plate here that was burnished. That was made by Ramona Sanchez Gonzalez. But if you look at the designs, so again, they're old San Ildefonso style designs, but they become new. And then if you look at the two snakes on this pot, the painting back here that was done by my grandfather, Okuape. So inspiration comes from a lot of these old things. And what I tend to do is take something old, but make it new so it becomes timeless. So nothing's actually changed. Everything stays the same, but it's new. And so that's how it lives on. Because for us at San Ildefonso, and I'm sure elsewhere, tradition means moving forward, not staying stagnant, not staying stuck in the past and being repetitive, but coming up with your own interpretation and own ideas. That's what they mean. That's what the potters used to mean in the old days, by taking something old and making it new. This is what I do, take it and make it your own. That's the saying in Tewa. So it basically means that keep walking forward, don't stay tied down to the past, because then you die. Back to Bruce.
Eric, I'd hope you expand on this a little bit, both the idea of identifying makers and the idea of traditions always moving forward.
Yeah. So like Russell and Bruce are saying, you know, and like I said earlier, it's a living art, and it's always evolving. So when you look at the older designs, and we reinterpret those and we incorporate that into our work, you know, it's bringing it back to life and giving it a new purpose and in a new way, evolving, moving forward, like Russell just said, walk forward. And you know, with the work that we've been doing with the collections in different areas, and looking at, you know, Martina and Florentino's work, Marnita's, Ignacia's, Cipriana, all these older potters that are no longer here, but you know, we're able to identify their work and the hand that built these pieces. And it's been really a really great journey that we've been on, because I've been able to learn a lot about my own family and going back, you know, several generations. So it's really like I said, a really fantastic journey that we've been on. Martina, who would be my great great grandfather's sister, and their mother, Cipriana, and then the other ties to other potters within the village. So, you know, like I said, it's a really amazing to look at these things, to look at the pots, and to be able to say, oh, my great grandmother, she did this, or my great aunt, or you know, whoever it is, and it's the ideas that came from them that we see still yet, you know, in some of the styles of, like, my grandmother. I can see how she was inspired maybe by Dolorita Vigil, and who would be her aunt, my great grandfather's sister. So, in the style that she developed in her pottery, by looking at a piece, you can tell, a lot of times, well, this is a Vigil piece, or this is a Sanchez, Ignacio Sanchez, or Yellow Deer. So, it's really an eye opener to see all these pieces. Bruce?
So just thank you, Eric. So I thought just talk a little bit about the history of pottery as we understand it. The history of San Ildefonso pottery and the story of the SAR and the museums in Mexico is all combined at times. And it's an interesting story, and there's really nothing really wrong with the story because it's a great piece of origin mythology, but it is a mythology. It doesn't have much to do with on the ground people. One of the things I had long written about and talked about was that in 1909, Edgar Hewitt, the founder of the school and the museum, handed Maria Martinez a lump of clay from Puye, thank you, from Puye. And then there is a Sergei rock art panel, and asked her to create this piece of pottery from those two different pieces, the rock art from one place and the clay from another. And one day, I had written this out in a chapter, and Russell said to me, Maria would never use a lump of clay from someplace else. It's not hers to use, and it'd be too dry, and lots of other reasons. So both reasons, cultural reasons, as well as just mechanical reasons of using it. And it really causes one to stop and think. The other thing is that the story of the museum and this sort of singular family is much taken over by the commercialization of pottery in the beginning in the 1920s, the signing of pots that first show up about 1923 on a regular basis, the selling of pots through what today is Indian market. And those are great good mechanisms. People needed a way to enter the economy, but people gave up a lot to enter the economy. People also at San Ildefonso in particular was very hard hit with the flu epidemic in 1918. About 30% of the population of the community died in the flu epidemic, which caused a sort of disruption of a lot of traditional things, including pottery. And so when the museum and the school and Hewitt work with potters, they only work with two people basically and their husbands. They really don't work with the 20 potters, at least 20 potters that exist in the Pueblo. So we have to ask ourselves how accurate that narrative is about the origins of pottery and what role Hewitt plays, and why he ignores all these great potters that are around. Certainly in 1907, well, he starts showing up at San Ildefonso in the late 1890s, but why does he ignore all those people and just focus on a few people? I think it's really important. Russell, you want me to talk about this piece?
Well, she's one of the ones.
Oh, I see what Russell. Well, we can point to this whole table basically as being ignored potters. If you think about it, that around Hewitt in 1907, 1908, when he first starts asking people to replicate things, including the famous story of black pottery, which is another great myth, but has no basis in truth. But why is he ignoring so many people? Why is he ignoring them? He became friends with one part of the village and not so much the other part of the village. And he actually angered part of the village over some things he told them they should do to be more native. That didn't sit well with people. And so in the first days of Indian market, a potter like Ramona, who made this piece, she would be ignored. I'm sorry.
Susanna.
What?
Susanna.
Oh, this is Susanna, I'm sorry. Thanks, Russell. That's Susanna, because she was Susanna Aguilar, she would be ignored in Indian market. And you don't have until the late 20s when Hewitt loses his say over market, that these other potters from the other side of the village start getting some recognition. So partly all I'm trying to say, and not drag people through the mud so much, is just trying to suggest what we know is very segmented and through our outsider eyes, not through insider eyes. So that's really one of the values of working with Russell and Eric. Now, either of you want to correct some of the things I'm suggesting here? You want to say anything? You want to come help me out?
No, you've got that pretty much right.
Okay. I want to talk, okay. Eric, anything? Okay, I'll fill in time.
No, you're good.
You what? I'm good. Thanks, guys. Really appreciate
You're
it.
good.
So the largest collection here at the school is San Ildefonso in the pottery in the Indian Arts Fund. And the largest collection at the Museum of Indian Arts and Culture, Museums of New Mexico, is also the San Ildefonso collections. They are the first collections of the museums. They are more or less the first big grouping of the Indian Arts Fund collecting as well. They're really important collections. And until we started this project, it's very hard to believe, but until we started this project, people from the community had not seen the collection. We did filming with 12 different people for the exhibition, and 10 of the 12 had never been in collections. That was extraordinary. There's one scene in the piece where I have a grandmother's pot of the person we're talking with, Laura, and she's crying about it. It's a very moving piece, and she wants to hold the pot, but she's never held the pot of her grandmother. So she's very nervous to hold it, but at the same time, she's very wanting to hold it at the same time. So one of the things that we tend to think, because we're convinced as anthropologists and art historians, we can look at a pot and we can decide who made that pot. This is a great example of that. This is a pot that comes from San Ildefonso, there's no doubt about that. But it could come from many different people. There's lots of things about it. It has the red and black combination on it. It has the larger area of design. All begun in the 1870s by those two potters, Yellow Deer and Marianita Roybal. And this is probably in the second generation of potters, potters beginning to work in earnest in the 1890s. Although this pot is made post 1905, which also gives you some of the ideas. If you think about a potter who starts working in the 1890s, who learns to make pots in the 1880s, 1870s, 1880s, and then makes pots beginning in the 1890s, let's say, and is still making pots in 1910 to 1920, just how many different ideas can go through that person's hands. And the complications of trying to date something just because it belongs to a certain potter, because one of the places where the art historical work about San Ildefonso is immature is we don't really look at the progression of dating, the idea of the evolution of styles. So this pot we go back and forth on in terms of who it is. It is again a water jar shape. It looks like it was never used. It doesn't seem to have any markings from use in it. It is a what we call a rag slip, which is the village begins to use in the 1905 or so time. And we think this could be Ignacia Sanchez's pot, or this could be Marianita Roybal's pot. Now, the reason I mention that to confuse us is that to think about these two women sitting together and working together. And the idea that they've got ideas, they're watching each other work. They're not copying each other, but they are thinking and talking with one another as they're working. We also know, and it's in photographs too, that there were certain places where everybody fired. If you think about the way people fire pottery today, people have their own firing sheds. They have their own spot. They don't share the firing. At this time, when this pot was made, there was a firing area on the east end of the village, on the west end of the village, and people fired together. And we're talking about 30 or 40 pots in a single firing. If you think about how complicated that is. One of the other things I guess we didn't really talk about is how difficult it is to make Pueblo pottery. And you got some idea that these materials, what look like really straightforward materials turns into this is pretty incredible. So when we talk about pottery, we're always talking about pottery that follows the rules of traditional Pueblo pottery. And what's meant by that is people go out and get their own materials, they harvest their own clays, and paints and so forth. They hand build the pots, there's no wheels involved in this, and they fire outside. And each one of those steps makes making pottery exponentially more complicated. Erik's painting a little bit, so why don't we cut to you, Erik, and tell people what you're doing.
Yeah, so, as Bruce is talking, I'm sitting here painting a little bit, kind of filling in the design on this piece that I've been working on. And, like Bruce said, the two firing areas within the community, the collaboration between potters, even up into the probably the 60s. My mother talks about certain potters sitting together and working and helping each other, and it was a group effort. Collaborations. I've done collaborations with Russell, and we bring our own styles together and collaborate and create a piece that's unique and different. And so this sense of family and sense of community is what pottery is about, or should be about. And it's really in this past, several decades, I guess you'd say, it's become really more individualized and more more. I can't think of the word I was going to use, but it's the commercialization, I guess you'd say, and it's made a impact on how many potters are still here active in the Pueblo. It's made an impact on pricing. It's made an impact on the whole general idea of pottery and a lot of things that have become so secretive, and how people work on their art, their pottery. But yet, we're here talking about our work. Me and Russell are talking about our work with you today, sharing some of what we use and how we do things. And to me, it's about sharing, and it's about giving back to the community the best way I can. And, and in the hopes that this will continue on into the future. The table in the back there, the collection of pots in the back on the other table at SAR, they said represents 4 different potters that were working at that, late 1800s, early 1900s. And, so they passed on to one generation to another, and now we're carrying that on. And at the time, when Hewitt visited the Pueblo, and like Bruce said, concentrated on maybe 1 or 2 people, but what about the others? And, it's amazing to me to see all the different styles that were created by these potters, and like I had mentioned earlier about black on black. I talked to other people, and they don't even know that San Ildefonso did polychrome ware. It's just that idea of black on black pottery. It's these styles, these techniques that me and Russell are trying to revive and to bring back to life is something, the education of the outside people, communities, or outside, entities, museums, and stuff like that. So again, it's really been a pleasure working on these projects that we've been doing. So, Bruce.
They keep calling on me. I think I'd rather hear from the 2 of them. So Russell, I would ask you to talk a bit about the designs and some of the meanings of designs, where the ideas of designs come from, both on your work, but maybe some of the historic work as well.
Well, designs have pretty general meanings. They're prayers for rain, for crops, for the nature, pretty much nature. But again, like here, you've got a checkerboard, which represents the heavens and the earth. That's what they mean, rotating black and white. Sometimes they can be red. If you put a dot in there, then they become a corn design. Over here, you've got your cloud figures plus your bird hanging down below the cloud. Then so like I would translate that to my pot, and over here I have the two snakes, which represent the winter society and the summer society. That on this side, you have the sun with the two versions of the designs that represent those two societies. On this side, it's hogtail. On this side, it's eagle, and then the other birds that are there. So designs can change. Again, people are drawn to the old, but again, we're inspired to change the design. Here on this plot, you have whirlwinds here. Maybe that's what she was thinking, but it more than likely looks like that. On this pot, this plate here, on top here, you can see what resembles a butterfly, but down here, you see a bird. Here's the wings coming up and here's the tail. So again, she was just inspired to create something different, and it just keeps changing and growing. But again, it goes back to personal interpretation. What means something for one person is not always the same. It's like on this piece here, we decided to do a mountain line, and you've got what we call eagle wing going this way and gourd design. A lot of people think this originated in Santa Clara, but it actually didn't. The pueblos of Pewaukee, Nambe, San Ildefonso, San Juan, a lot of the northern pueblos did this style of work early on, and then it shifted to polychrome. And then here with the bird, I've got an old school bird, which was done in the 20s by a lot of the painters from San Ildefonso. Julian, Abel, all these, Alfonso Roybal, all these people here, all these men here. So you've got a lot of changes, and it just keeps evolving. So back to Bruce for a bit.
Hey, Eric, do you want to add anything to that about design and their meanings?
Yeah, so like Russell, was saying, you know, it's up to individuals how they interpret the design or what they were thinking at the time. You know, I talked about this being inspired by the older pieces. You know, it's more of a floral design. And like Russell's saying, the use of the checkerboard, you know, there's different interpretations on how they're used and how, you know, if it's on the rim of a pot, maybe that represents the Milky Way or a star. You know, on this piece, to me, the central checkerboard on this piece represents a cornfield with the different, so there's black and red checkers, and those represent the different types of corn and the different colors of corn. So there's different interpretations. He talked about adding dots to things, and that also represented the corn. And here's another piece that I did, the black on red. It's the old style fancy bird, you know, my interpretation. So there's a lot of variations in design work and in the meanings. So those meanings and those interpretations are always evolving, and it's you can't just look at a design and say, oh, that's what it means literally. You know, it could mean several things, and it could mean something to one person and mean something completely different to another person. But basically, design work always followed, you know, the way it follows is, you know, on the top of the pot would usually be design work that was things that are in the air, in the heaven. And then you come down lower and you're at the next level, close to the earth. And then also, you know, this one, a lot of people interpret these as just as feathers, but to me, these represent rainbows. So, you know, the designs are always geared towards fertility, the crops, animals, but most importantly, you know, a lot of these vessels are prayers for rain that are manifested in clay. And, you know, that's the main, you know, a lot of them were used as water jars to hold water. But, you know, they're all prayers. And throughout the whole process, you know, there's always with prayer and good thoughts. And it's, you know, painting pottery is probably my most favorite part of doing pottery. I can sit there. I don't really think about what I'm going to paint. I don't know what I'm going to paint when I start a piece. But, you know, once the paint starts going, it comes alive and it takes a life of its own and a direction of its own. And I'm able to create the design work. And like I said, that's my favorite part of doing pottery. And especially doing polychrome and black on red, because the design work, you can be a little more elaborate, a little more fancy with what you're doing. Whereas when I do black on black, it's more localized. You know, black on black pottery, you're kind of wanting to highlight the polishing and not so much the design work, or you don't want to overdo the design work. So, you know, there's a difference in how I approach the different styles that I do. Bruce?
We have a lot of questions. So we're coming, hello again. So we're coming towards the end of our time together, and we have about 15 minutes for questions, which I'd love for you all to ask Erik and Russell questions. I think that the idea of design, people always want to know if they're symbols or metaphors. They're not symbols or metaphors, but if people put clouds on a pot, they're clouds. And this idea of moisture or fertility and bringing moisture and fertility, bringing life, good life to the village. A pot is a prayer, as both Russell and Erik have said, and it is a prayerful activity to make the pot. You go out onto the landscape, on that landscape, and you harvest those materials. You then shape those materials using two very sacred substances, being water and earth itself. You use fire and wind also to help you shape a finished pot. So you use 4 very sacred substances to create a piece of pottery. And so the whole activity is a prayer. And then something that potters often say, which is very true, if you're having bad thoughts while you're making pottery, those bad thoughts are in the pot itself. So this idea of making pottery and making it the right way, I think is a complicated thing. And I always think an easy example is to talk about trucks. Now people worry, are you supposed to walk to gather your clay or harvest your clay, or do you take a truck? I don't think it makes a difference about using a truck, because I think people have continued to change. It is the same prayerful act to get in the car and drive to the place to harvest your clay. But if you get in the car and you drive to the store to buy your clay, that is a very different act than harvesting your own clay. It puts you in a very different relationship with your materials and with your building and so forth. And those are things to think about, and the values that Pueblo people in San Ildefonso, as we're talking about today, maintain through their pottery. It's very important. I would also say, and I'm just always struck by this, that San Ildefonso is an amazingly generous community. And I mean that there are certain days where once the pandemic is completed or over or under control, that we're invited into the village. We're invited to see these ceremonies and these dances and things that go on. Everything is right in front of us to share. And it's the same with pottery. Those prayers, those great meanings of the cosmology and universe as San Ildefonso people understand them, are all on the pottery to share. Russell or Erik, closing words before we take questions? Russell?
One thing I did want to point out is we were always taught, and to this day we feel this way, is stay humble when you're working with clay. Don't forget these are the gifts that God gave us: earth, wind, fire, clay, to shape some of these things and make them what they are. And we're always taught, be a humble person, keep your pots humble. Arrogance, getting too cocky, getting all that, then the pots feel it, and then the pots don't come out. So it's all about being humble. That's what these people were. They didn't have anything, hardly anything, nothing like what we've got today. And look what they created, look what they came up with. That's what they left us. And so that's what we learned from them. It's just be humble with it.
Eric, any closing remarks?
Ditto what Russell just said. No, but yeah, it is. It's a, like Russell just said, it's the thing that we were taught is to be humble and to respect the clay. And, it's not always about money. Our ancestors, those that created those pieces behind the pieces that are in the exhibit that we co-curated at MIAC, the pieces that are there at SAR, those people, they didn't have much, but yet they're able to create something that's so beautiful and so meaningful. And I think when I look at a lot of pottery that are in collections, and you kind of date them, try to date them, you can tell a lot of times that a pot maybe was made when the year was a really good year. The harvest was good. There was a lot of rain to nourish the crops, or the hunting was good. So the people weren't worried about food. They weren't worried about things like that. And design work tends to become more elaborate in years that maybe, they were having to work harder for less, maybe in a drought or something like that. You maybe see the designs aren't quite as elaborate. So, there's the correlation between what's going on within the community, or sickness, or, whatever's going on. But, main thing, like Russell said, is the humility, humbleness, and respect. So, Bruce?
Thank you, Eric and Russell, both. Is amazingly generous. Again, you can see just what a pleasure it is to work with these two guys and their families and other members of the community. It's been a real honor and privilege. We're going to switch over, Michael, if you're still there, and take some questions. We have some questions already, and people, please send some questions.
We do have some questions. We probably have more than we can ask, but let me start with one that's from Maryland. It says it's for Eric and Russell. She asks, in your experience living with your family, how did your relatives incorporate their pottery work into their lives? Was it on a daily basis? Did they set aside certain times of day or days of the week, or was it more organically driven by certain responsibilities that the family or the community had on particular dates?
Good question. Russell?
Well, it was driven by the lives that they led. I mean, back then they didn't have clocks. They didn't have to worry about getting to a job, performing 8 to 5. It's the same as it is today. When you're a potter, the clay dictates the time that you put into it. When you start building a pot, you have to go slowly to build it. So it's literally sometimes a 2-day process just to build a pot. You have to let it set, then you got to babysit it. Then when it's time to feed the family, they would feed the family. Then they would have to go back to the pot and make sure it's not falling down or falling inward. But as any artist would tell you, it's never set by a clock, never 8 to 5, or never 7 days. It's when you feel inspired, when you start working on the pot, the attention you have to give a pot, it's like you give a newborn. A newborn is coming up, getting set to go out into the world, being raised. It's the same with a pot. Since we look at pots as people, it's the same thing. Eric?
Yeah, so, with my family, it was basically like Russell said, I grew up with my grandmother, and for her, pottery was, and for me, it was something that I grew up with, and I saw it day in, day out. And whenever my grandmother worked, and being able to learn from her, not by her sitting there and teaching me and saying, do it this way, do it that way, but by observing and seeing what she did, and then gaining more responsibility as I got older, in gathering the clay, preparing clay, um, helping with the firing. Started off by going out into the fields and collecting cow dung that we used, getting the horse manure, chopping wood, and then being able to kind of graduate to where, I was actually setting up the firing and getting to the point where my grandmother would say, I have these pots finished, fire them for me. So, it's the time it takes to learn, the time it takes to go put into the pottery is, it's dependent on the seasons, dependent on activities within the community, dependent on an individual's mood, if the inspiration's there or not. So, there's a lot of factors that play into the creation of a piece of pottery.
Thank you. There's a question that came in from Steve Trimble, who I'm sure you know. The question is, can any of you talk about the changing market for contemporary artist work? He says, back in '87, when I wrote the first edition of my SAR press book, Talking with the Clay, Indian art was hot, and innovators like Russell were just getting going. Some years later, the market seemed to emphasize the most radically innovative potters, and many potters were concerned about decreasing interest in their mothers' and grandmothers' classic pieces. Where do you think the market for Pueblo pottery is headed right now, based on recent experience? And by the way, Steve says it's great to see you guys.
Well, for myself, markets have always been great and good. Part of that for me, I feel, is that I'm just constantly evolving and constantly changing, and I don't let a market dictate what I'm going to produce or not produce. I produce what I feel and what I've inspired at the moment to produce. So for me, it's still been great, and it's always been great.
Erik?
Yeah, and just like Russell's saying, the the economy, yeah, those are all factors, but this is part of my life, and I continue to do pottery practically every day. I'm doing something that has to do with pottery, whether it's gathering clay, processing clay, and like Russell just said, I'll make what I want to make when I want to make. I don't, oh, well, this style is selling, the contemporary piece is selling. I'm going back to a more traditional style and wanting to educate people that these are the older styles of pottery. But at the same time, as I mentioned, we had talked about earlier, is innovating, but yet, or getting inspired by the older pieces, but making it our own. And I continue to work in different styles of pottery, whatever my mood dictates. I can go from creating something that's really contemporary and including like a silver lid, a sterling silver lid, or different materials added to the pot, and then turn around and work on a piece that's completely traditional. So, it's like I said, a lot of factors, but this is a part of who we are, and we continue to work on creating the pieces that we do. So, yeah.
Laura Sullivan has a question I'm sure is on a lot of people's minds.
In terms of Steve, hi Steve, how are you? Nice to hear you listening to us. I think the marketplace has changed dramatically, and there's several contributions to why and how the market changed. We certainly saw a change in the market for pottery in 2008 with the recession, and a lot of people went to jewelry making. There's also been a large influx of people into the Santa Fe area from other areas that don't make pottery. There's also the people have taken shortcuts, and they've shortcutted Pueblo pottery. They kiln fire, let's say, or they use materials they store by. And there's nothing wrong with using any other processes, but you can't sell it as Pueblo pottery. And I think that it is made by a Pueblo person, but it doesn't follow those traditional lines as people like Erik and Russell set out and other Pueblo potters. So it's hard to set up an equivalence of today what's going on and what's gone on sort of pre-2000, pre-2005. And the market changed and the collectors have changed a great deal where they're much more interested in jewelry in the last few years. But I think the quality potters, as we hear from both Erik and Russell, we see that in other people, I think the quality people are still very much, they find they do have a market because they keep taking ideas and making it their own.
So the follow-up question to that was how the pandemic has affected the pottery market. And I mean, there are obvious things that you could talk about. I'm sure that Pueblo's locked down and so on, but do you see a long-term impact on the market, or is it just a short-term sort of challenge for you guys?
Well, as I've said earlier, the pandemic has not really affected my market since I'm finding that the high-end collectors there and the collectors that want quality are buying less, but they're buying better pieces. So it has not affected me at all.
Erik, do you have the same experience?
And for me, yeah, pretty much the same experience, but it's also been a way to, I'm still selling, but it's been a way to kind of slow down and concentrate more on, thinking about the older pieces and using that. I'm not having to produce as many pieces to provide for my family, but being able to, like I said, slow down a little bit and, try different ideas and I guess maybe experiment a little bit and not worrying so much about, oh, I got to finish these pieces for this show. I got to get these to this collector. I got to get these to this gallery. So, I mean, yes, the pandemic is a serious issue, but sometimes things happen for a reason. I don't know. It's just maybe a blessing in disguise in some ways. So, yeah.
All right, thank you. Lorena Gomez, how are the pottery making traditions passed on to the next generation today? I mean, maybe the follow-up would be, are there formal classes, or do you have an apprentice who works with you? How do you, more typically today, how do younger people become interested in pottery?
Well, for me, they just get interested the same way that we got interested, by watching. There's really no set formal training. It's like they keep your eyes, and the older potters would watch you, give you a lump of clay and let you play with it and let you develop on your own time at your own skill level and come up with your own methods and your own ways. Things like this, you don't teach. It's something that's inherent inside of that person that wants to learn.
And when I was younger, there was a lot of potters in the Pueblo. A lot of those older potters have passed on, and it's not as many people doing pottery. I mean, I've had people come to me and ask me, can you teach me pottery? Well, I can't teach you. I can show you what I do. I can show you my techniques and show you the process, but it's not really, Russell just said, it's not something that you just teach. There's not a formal way of teaching pottery. It's something that comes from the heart. And, you know, like I said, I've had people come and ask me, and I, you know, sure, yeah, come over. I'll show you what I do. But then once they find out how much hard work it is, you know, it kind of lose them. You know, they're expecting me to give them a lump of clay and they're going to make a pot and sell it for $1 million the next day. You know, it's a lot of work and it's a lot of risk and it's dirty work, you know. So, yeah.
I think those are good points. And then that Pueblo generations, just like in Anglo society, social media and other poles of society, people have jobs and live outside their communities. All those things play in this too, that people don't have as much time to just sit and learn just by watching, but whether people think they can watch a YouTube or go to a class. So it's a very different way of living today than it was. And people need their jobs, perhaps outside their communities, in the sense that people aren't farming as they once was. So those first generations of potters in the 20th century could always fall back on other ways to earn a living. But as we got into the 60s and 70s, people became full-time potters and all their income from one place. So if something happened, as we've experienced over the last 2 decades, that means you don't have as many people potting perhaps. I will say though that that on the collector side, I think we've sort of winnowed collectors in a certain way of speaking. I don't mean that disrespectfully, but I think the collectors now are very knowledgeable and very, very interested. And I find great pleasure in hearing how much people are interested and listening to what potters have to say. So.
I've got a question from Stacy Lewandowski. She says, thank you. I'd like to ask whether the black on black was a new innovation at the time or whether there was an earlier tradition on which it drew. And if so, where did that tradition emerge, if you know?
The black pottery question is a constant question. And if you think about pottery changing every time Tewa people had a change in historical, in their social or historical circumstances. So if we looked at potters in Tewa way of world, we see that there is a great deal of change as people migrate from the north. So pottery begins to change a great deal in the 1300s. Pottery then next begins to change a great deal as Spanish people come and colonize and settle in New Mexico. So pottery again changes. It again changes at the Pueblo Revolt at the end of the 17th century. And one of the changes when Spanish people came in terms of the amount of pottery is black pottery. Some people think that the Spanish brought indigenous peoples with, well, Spanish did bring indigenous peoples with them from Mexico and maybe brought the idea of making black pottery. People knew how to make that pottery here, but the change was that people made it more often. It made a sort of gray, a kind of shiny, kind of gray, but often pitted surface. And what the innovations of the early 20th century was to make to lower the firing temperature, to make a more even colored, always black pottery. Now, the reason why Hewitt in 1908 asked Maria to make that style of pottery was he knew that there was black pottery in all the Tewa Pueblos. It wasn't a mystery to him, but he wanted to prove an archaeological theory. He wanted to prove how Tewa people had moved down the Pajarito to where San Ildefonso is today, and he needed to find the right type of pottery from this that he hypothesized had come from this one place. So he asked Maria to make that pottery, and I don't know why he asked her and not somebody else, but he asked her to make that pottery. And if she could make that pottery, it would prove that she had the biological memory of having lived at this place. That's how crazy things were at that time. And again, I don't know why he chose her or anything like that. She certainly was a pretty good potter at that point. Her husband was not interested in pottery at that point. There were many, what we would say, more accessible potters at that particular time. The black on black innovation is something that she and her husband worked on probably for about a period of 10 years. Julian really wanted to paint decorations of some type on this black pottery. And he worked on finding a way to do that. And they finally came across a way to do that probably in the winter of 1919, 1920. Now, I always said it's 10 years experimentation, but Julian really didn't start making pottery in a more serious way until probably 1917, 1918. Another day we could talk about why that is. So they started to experiment with a mixture of a mineral and a little bit of bee weed, and they found this way to do this. They also changed all the iconography at that point. They found that the polychrome iconography, like the pots here, didn't really work. And so they also, Julian picked up a piece of members pottery, and that feather design comes from a pot probably about 1100 Christ era. So that's a very short way of talking about that. It's a long question. I don't know, Eric or Russell. Russell's saying you go. Eric, pretty close? Okay, next question. Okay, thanks. Next question.
Okay. I'm getting a lot of thanks from a range of people, so I hope you'll look at the chat before you guys leave, just to see all the many people who are thanking you and sending their regards. Mark Chase sent a number of questions. We can't get to all of them, but why don't we end with a couple of questions related to the MIAC show. He asked some other things. How long, I mean, has the timetable for the show changed? Is it still up? How much longer it's going to be up? And is there a catalog for the exhibition? And if so, has it come out? When will it come out?
Good questions. I guess these are my questions. I understand the MIAC exhibition is up till the end of the year. That's the current planning, but everything's a little in flux with the museums. So you've got, and the museums are supposed to open within the next few weeks, again, is what I understand. But of course, the website for Department of Cultural Affairs or for MIAC are the best places to see that. If you're here in town, and I just want to offer up, and we talked about it a little bit, the three of us, if you're here in town, if it's possible, we'll do as much guiding through the exhibition. We really want people to see the exhibition. We want to share what the experience was like in doing the exhibition. So the exhibition runs, we think, until the end of the year. That's the current information I have. And then we're making an online version of it. We're working on that right now. And actually the online version will be greatly enhanced in the sense you'll walk through the exhibition in a virtual walk, but we'll also include all the film footage and all the photography, the black and white historic photos that didn't make it into the final exhibition. The book project is I'm doing the bulk of the writing about that. And the book is pretty much done. I have the last section to kind of work on, what I'm working on now. I want the book to be perfect, of course. I feel an obligation to the community, and perfection is probably my enemy right now. I should just get it done. There'll be 300 or so illustrations of pottery in the book, both from the SAR Indian Arts Fund collection, as well as the museum collection. It's an extraordinary collection, and together it makes an even better statement. So probably the book is 2021 will be out.
Okay. Well, Bruce, Russell, and Eric, thanks so much for this this tremendous introduction to the history and practice of Ildefonso pottery. We've hit the 75-minute mark, so this is a good time to end. But again, I want to thank you for a great presentation, and I look forward to meeting you. Well, I did meet you in person at SIR, which was a change from the webinars we've been doing. But I look forward to actually being able, the day when we can shake hands, which is, of course, something we can't do today. But thank you very much. We're gonna end the webinar right here. I want to thank everybody who sat in on it. We had about 60 people who participated, and we're grateful for your involvement with SAR and with this great presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Yep, thank you.
Thanks, Eric.
Yep.